Hello, Branson. Welcome to the Alderman Report meeting for the October 26th, 2021 meeting. I'm so excited to be here today. This is the third time we've done it in this studio. We've got the live stream with us today as well, so we're really excited to get this out, not only improve the sound in the video, but disseminate it to as many people as we possibly can. I want to chat just for a second about the Branson Statesman, which is my publication that I've worked for and produced articles about different issues in Branson. I really want to reiterate that these reports that we're doing are somewhat of an arm of the Branson Statesman. So it's really important to kind of understand that these all go together in reporting the issues that are important to the Branson community. So we need to begin not really with the Tuesday meeting, but what happened the Thursday before it at the study session. Some people in town don't know what those are. We have our alderman meetings every 2 weeks, but then about once a month, they might happen every, two times a month if there's a lot of issues, but there's a thing called a study session. And what that is, there are no votes taken, but the aldermen speak, the public is welcome to attend, and they usually get long reports from city staff, maybe a long report from the budget and finance director, or whatever the case may be. So, folks, we have been dealing with I would say the best way to describe it is not to call it a policing issue, but a staffing issue for a long time now. A few years back, we asked the citizens, not myself, but some of the people in Branson government asked the citizens to pass a public safety tax, which would, was told that we would be able to really fund the officers and make sure that they're compensated well as our firefighters. And then there was some components in that as well, where we've got a really cramped police station, and there's been a plan in the works to build a new police station. It's really interesting in how this has all come about, because a lot of I wouldn't call them predictions, but I would say a lot of the intuitions that I had at the very beginning are kind of coming true about all this stuff. One of the things that I will say is that from the very beginning, and I'm a person that I'm not really comfortable with increased taxes, period, whether they're for a good, cause or not. Now, we do want to support our police and fire. That's absolutely important, especially as the whole defund the police thing is going around the country. If you really framed it how it should be framed, which is that our public safety workers, the police and fire, that's the same as giving a teacher a good salary. Those are public servants. They need to be paid well. And we'll talk about how there's a real crisis for our department here in just a second. But from the very beginning, when they implemented that tax, I was always a personnel over buildings guy. In other words, we need to make sure not only that we have enough officers, which we don't right now, but that they are compensated well enough so that we are not losing them to competitive outside cities, Nixa, Springfield, Ozark. I've said it probably on this stream multiple times. The best policing is community policing. And when our police aren't able to live inside the city limits of Branson, that's a problem on a number of fronts. So there were many police officers there last night speaking because they felt incredibly disrespected. The reason they felt disrespected was Stan Dobbins, who is our city administrator. And in the fourth class city, as we are in the state of Missouri, a city administrator is a very powerful position. He basically runs the day-to-day government. Think of like the chief of staff for the United States president, who really is the one who kind of running the executive branch on a day-to-day basis. That's what the city administrator does. And ours is, like I said, Stan Dobbins. He used to be the police chief for a time. We fired the former city administrator. A lot to do with the Highway 76 project debacle, where we spent $20 million on that and didn't see any results. We're now kind of revitalizing that. That's a story for another day. Anyway, Dobbins came in an interim position, and he's since become the permanent city administrator. He said at the last meeting, I'll paraphrase it, but he basically said, "Mr. Mayor, I don't care what you think about what I'm about to say. I've been a police officer for 40 some odd years, and the way our officers are acting downstairs is they're acting like children." I mean, that sent shockwaves through our entire community, folks. That was clipped, put on Facebook, it went viral, and the officers were there, and a lot of them spoke. And a lot of them spoke not only about having the wherewithal and the right compensation to take care of their families and to put food on the table. But they talked about how patronizing, literally, that comment was, how even more insulting it was for it to come out later that it was, quote unquote, a term of endearment. When you have a leadership role at the city like that, public relations, how you deal with your employees, how you deal with someone like myself, who's a prospective member of that board of aldermen, is very important. I've held this story back for a couple years now, but I think it's the right time to talk about it. A few years ago, they were trying to change an ordinance that said that this city administrator, Stan Dobbins, had to be either CC'd or in the room on every single communication. In other words, the alderman cannot talk to a member of city staff unless they included Stan Dobbins on that. That was one law they passed. Directly after that, they passed a bill that said the mayor can change abstention votes to no votes. This goes back to the whole mask mandate thing. It's a long story. Essentially, some of the people were using an abstention as a political maneuver to fail a bill that they didn't want to get passed. It still, in my opinion, didn't give the mayor the right to change their votes. So they basically instituted into the city code that the mayor has the right to do that. I don't get up and speak at every meeting. I don't just like to hear myself talk. But I did get up and speak at that one. And I said, let's not confuse things here. What you folks are doing by trying to change the ordinance that the mayor can now change votes is just as much a political maneuver as the filibuster type political maneuver that was done before. So I sat down, that was my comment, and just saying that they were being strategic just like the other guys were being strategic. I sit down, I was sitting right in line with, at the time, Alderman Milton, who became our mayor. He looks at me and he said, Marshall, I agree with everything you just said. And the aforementioned Stan Dobbins, our city administrator, was off in the corner. I don't, just like that, yelled out in the meeting. I'm tired of his lies, was what he said. So some of the aldermen sort of motioned to me, almost wanting me to respond. But I wasn't going to speak out of turn like he spoke out of turn. I gestured back to them and said, proceed. The meeting continues. The end of the meeting rolls around where each of the aldermen and the city administrator are to give their reports if they have one. Like I said, I'm facing forward. The city administrator faces to the side. He's sort of looking directly at me. He approaches the podium like this. He says, Marshall, look at me. And I turned at him with an icy glare as he proceeds to dress me down for 5 minutes. I wasn't raised right. He's tired of my lies, integrity, this and that. Folks, I still don't know to this day what I lied about and what he's even referring to, that I'm a liar. I wrote many rebuttal speeches at home in my study that I was going to give to rebut him. But you know what? I filed every single one of those speeches away, never to see the light of day. But for the community to now see how this person has operated in that position for a long time, let's just say it's somewhat vindicating. I don't take any pride or any happiness in it because our police officers do not deserve to be talked that way. Stan Dobbins never apologized to me about that moment. We had a nice moment when Larry was inaugurated. I went up to him and shook his hand, and he kind of gave me a keep going type of speech, quick, still patronizing in some ways, but cordial. He did give an apology last night. I'll give him credit for that. We're a town of forgiveness. But I don't believe this is the kind of person who needs to be running our city. And that's all I'll say about that until we win the next election. Next thing I want to bring up is Cherry Webster. She's been talking about this for a long time, the Country Bluff project. She's basically asking for the status on the zoning change. I want to mention one of the things that she talked about. She specifically called out Alderman Bill Skanes, who said, I'm all for giving it a first reading. Folks, that's a tool that the establishment will often use to move something through. They'll give it a first reading and act like they're just trying to move it along so it can be voted on again. But really, then they'll use the justification that it was already read through and passed through once to pass it through again. So I just think it's really important that we kind of we kind of deal with, again, some of those strategic maneuvers that they kind of turn the arrows towards us, So that's really important to sort of know their tactics so that we can avoid being the victim of their tactics, quite frankly. Again, it all goes back to the whole returning the police issue. When the tourism tax or when the public safety tax was passed in the first place, a former alderwoman who served on the board at that time, Betsy McConnell, got up and spoke last night, and she said, we're exactly where she said we would be. There were promises of an oversight committee that never happened. There was a group of Alderman Skanes and former aldermen that would meet at a restaurant somewhere. That was not an oversight committee. An oversight committee meets at City Hall. It's recorded. It's sunshineable. All those things. There has been no oversight of this tax. She also talked about how there's been no that there was promised to be no supplanting of funds. In other words, things that used to be paid by the general fund, which are now being paid by the public safety tax. So in other words, if you do that, they're talking about IT things being, radios, laptops for the police officers are now being paid out of the public safety tax fund. So what did we gain? All we did was pull from one fund. We didn't add any new revenue. When we're asking the citizens to pay a higher tax, but supplanting funds, I don't appreciate it. Now, there's been audits in the past, and this issue has been hammered into the ground. And Larry Milton has brought it up, and Betsy's brought it up. And I would be remiss to say that we have had auditors come, and they have said that they didn't find supplanting of funds. Now, Larry's point last night was that the semantics are important on that, because not to find supplanting of funds is different than to say there weren't any, And Betsy, I know that it's her perspective that the auditors didn't believe that was within their scope. So we really need to get a lot of oversight on this public safety tax. When they're using this as a political tool, when Alderman Skanes runs on the platform of promises made, promises kept, and you go and you drive over behind Tanger Mall there to the spot where the new police station is supposed to be, and on the sign it says promises made, promises kept. Folks, when are the promises going to be kept? That's my question. And instead of the promises being kept and for them to build a new Shangri-La, as Gary Groman likes to put it, in a brand new police station that we don't need, just like we didn't need a brand new chamber building either, focus on people over buildings. It's that simple. That's going to be my moniker, because we do have crime rising in this community. Just talking to the person that produces this show, we've got crime rising in this community. It's a problem. Don't put your head in the sand. It's real. So, again, Bill Skanes, quote, "I helped pass that tax. I made those promises." Well, you did make those promises, Alderman Skanes, and people are going to remember that in the next election if they aren't fulfilled. So the next thing they talked about was some of the legislative priorities. We always do this. We set aside legislative priorities. We have a lobbyist who works that we hire and contract with as far as the city government of Branson. And also, of course, we have our state rep and state senator who go to Jefferson City and advocate on behalf of some of the things that we'd like to see passed at the state level. One of them is an issue that's been kind of a hot button issue where our fire department is now saying, people can't cook in these extended stay motels. Folks, the problem is it really is a health safety hazard. I understand that it's taking food out of people's mouths, and we do not need to do that at all. But at the same time, people do not need to be living in hotels. They're not designed for that. In other words, the new legislation that's proposed is saying you can either be a hotel or you can be an apartment/condo. You can't be both, because apartments and condos have sprinkler systems, the whole thing, to make it to where they can cook inside those rooms. You cannot have a hot plate in a room that's going to cause it to burn down. It's not a lack of empathy. It's just common sense in public safety. I feel for those people. I absolutely do. But we need to have a distinction between hotel and a condo apartment. It's that simple. So I'll return to the issue once more about because what the police are asking for is a 3% pay increase. And what I appreciate is that Larry Milton, our new mayor, is always focused on budgets, and he's really getting now at this point to be able to hammer down on some of those issues. And Cody Fenton, I appreciated some of his perspective last night. He was focused on the discretionary funds. We actually have a 4.2 million that is not earmarked for anything that we could use for those 3% pay increases. The question is, are we going to diminish our reserves for future years? But the question that I would pose in opposition to that is that the idea that Alderman Fenton is putting forward is we use those discretionary funds now and to buy us a year or 2 years so that we will be able to actually cut down our spending and increase our savings in the future. It's sort of a challenge to ourselves. But folks, isn't it the same risk, almost the opposite side of the coin of the risk that you're taking when you spend $20 million on a development project that you're not sure is going to pan out? That's the same risk as us giving raises to the people who protect us every day with a goal, aspiration, and a mission statement that we are going to decrease the deficit in this city. So, again, Larry Milton talked about perhaps pushing the construction of the police station to next year, and I appreciate that perspective because I'm on the same page as him on that. So we're going to wrap up with a couple things here. In her report, Alderwoman Denham, we've talked about the waiving of the fees that she's brought up before. Has anybody ever waived a fee for a development project that another development project didn't get that fee waived for? And she's asked for that report. She followed up on the status of that report, and we were told by Assistant City Manager John Manning that we're going to have that by about the end of the month. And the final thing I want to talk about is the YouTube comments on the city's YouTube page. I brought this up last time. I told you all I was going to give a speech about it, and actually I was intending on going to, but I didn't get there in time to sign up at the beginning. But it was somewhat of a good reason because there's kind of a semantical deal that's happening now. The comments are turned off, folks. But the live stream chat is on, and that does exist. So in some ways, that is a comment page. Personally, I would like to see every avenue for the citizens to comment, even not while it's going on, but into the future, be open. But I do understand that I think it was more of an oversight as opposed to trying not to be transparent. So I just wanted to bring you guys an update on that. And I really appreciate you guys joining us. I appreciate y'all joining us on the live stream. And a few of y'all were asking me where these went. We have continued to do these after every Alderman meeting. We just putting them on the Forsyth Headline News website, the YouTube page, and then sharing them to the Facebook. Sometimes the algorithm doesn't allow you to see it. But we do appreciate you guys joining us today. One other thing, they passed the Ozark Mountain Christmas proclamation last night. The board passed it. That was a huge deal. We've been working on that for a long time. So now all we got to do as a citizen, as a community, is go and make that happen and put it into effect. So I appreciate you all so much. Hey, Merry Christmas. God bless. Take care.